Good morning. Oh, excuse me. It's got very cold very quickly. We're a minute off starting. And as you all know, being a speaker, I like to start on time and end on time. And that's going to be my tip for you today is, if you really want to be a speaker, you really want to speak about your business, or you want to take it that step further than it just being effective speaking, and actually you're out there on stages, big stages, then timing is vital. Okay, let's have Mary in. Good morning. She was here. Now, oh, there she is. Hello, Mary. Good morning to you. How are you? I can't hear you. You're on mute.
Oh yeah, sorry. I'm just getting caught up with everything. I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm all right, actually. Although it's got cold very quickly.
Yeah, and wet.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we're dead on 9 o'clock. I was saying, as a speaker, for me, timing is like so important. I like to start on time and finish when I say I'm going to finish.
Yeah.
So let me just find and share what we're talking about today. And then we can make a start. Share screen.
Can I ask a question before we get going?
Yes, of course.
I have noticed this when I've been to different events, and people perhaps who probably aren't trained in speaking, and that's most of us, I would think. But quite often they will lose their audience because they may have started well, but they go on and over the time, even by 5 minutes can be a long time. And I find myself switching off.
Yeah.
And then you've lost them completely. Do they actually remember anything you've said?
Absolutely. And I think it's disrespectful to an audience to go over. So people have got an agenda or they know the timings and things like that. I personally, as a trained speaker, you finish on time. What happens is 9 times out of 10 people wing it. And they've got this idea of the speech in their head and on they go. And because they haven't structured it right, or they haven't really thought about the ending in terms of what's the outcome you want. So as a speaker, it is always, I start with, well, what do I want at the end of this? What is the outcome that I want or the audience need? And so that I can structure it accordingly. And it doesn't matter whether it's 15 minutes or an hour. If you structure it right and get your timing right, you're not going to drift off towards the end. And I've seen people suddenly realize, oh, I've got lots more time. I'll just make it up as I go along. Or you get people who haven't timed it, like you say, they go over. And yeah, I think it's criminal. That's a bit strong, but I just think from an audience point of view, and I remember being at a meeting once and I was the third speaker. It was quite a big conference. And because the first two speakers had gone over time by quite a bit, I ended up having to reduce down a half-hour speech to 10 minutes.
Oh no, that's really unfair.
Yeah, and I was quite insulted by that because I'd spent my time going there. I think the audience were then, not given the opportunity to hear everything that every speaker wanted to say. So I'm very much the opinion that there's a discipline in being a speaker.
Yeah.
And one of those disciplines is timing, knowing how long you've got, giving the audience what they need, and it not being all about you.
Yeah.
So that's quite an important thing for me. So, we've got 2 today. I'm impressed.
I've got competition for your attention. Damn.
Hello, Christina. Good morning. It's very slow from the waiting room to here.
They slide in slowly rather than jumping in.
Yeah, okay. Right, so what I'm going to do is Christina's got a mic and her video off, and that's fine. That's not a problem. I'm going to share the screen and we will make a start on the topic today. Yeah. Which is about media habits of different individuals. So we talked about audiences and we talked about where you find your audiences. But the next step on from that is knowing how they receive that information. So the idea that everybody is on Facebook watching lives, or everybody's watching video, or everybody's, is wrong. And knowing the habits of your clients or your customers, whatever they may be, knowing their habits generally, and I'm not, this is a generalization because, you know, I'm of an older person, but I still quite like watching weird videos on YouTube. You need to know so that you don't waste your time. So let's dive in. So people use different types of media, and they use different types to be informed. They use different types to be entertained. They use different types to just meet up. We live in a world where people could just sit in front of their computer and go anywhere, to be fair. But, and this is the big but, younger generation are actually less inclined to go out. They're more inclined to be streaming, live streaming, they use social media. It'll always be on the 9 times out of 10 on their phone. So if you're aiming, if that's your audience generally, then you have to be really conscious that they're probably not going to sit in front of a computer, but they'll sit in their bedrooms with their phone and they'll watch on their phone. They have very little attention span. So whatever you do, whichever media you use, it has to be quite short and sharp for them to take it in. So you might have to chop down stuff into little video things. They like live streaming. They like to watch, not necessarily even to join in. And I've had people say, I do live streaming and I know people are there, but they don't get engaged and they don't, not necessarily, they don't sometimes, they're just listening. And again, you have to ask yourself, what is the main purpose of what you are doing? So if you're live streaming to get a live audience, the way you do that will be different than if you go, I'm going to live stream just so that I can raise awareness of myself and things like that. Then it may not necessarily matter if they haven't all turned up on the day, because you've still got that media to use. Now, the older generation, my generation, they like traditional media. That's what they were brought up on, traditional media, radio, television. So you can get away with traditional videos and podcasting because that sits within their comfort zone. But equally, they love newsletters, they love newspapers, they love to read things. Now, as a speaker, I'm not advocating that everybody should just write everything down, but I think you have to think about that. It's not always about what they hear. An older generation likes to read. We were brought up to read, so it's not something that we shy away from. Unfortunately, and I say this with a heavy heart because my own kids were as bad, they don't read. And we may not understand it, but that's the fact. They don't read, they watch, they listen. So think about those different groups. Now, you may be working with groups that maybe have difficulty, you know, some sort of disability. So you have to think about, are they listening? Are they seeing? Are they reading? How is that media coming across and what do I use? Are they a formal group? So if you're in maybe legal services or accounting services, it may be a more traditional format that you're going to use. So video, pre-recorded video may work better than live streaming. Are they really, really busy? Are your audience 9 times out of 10 haven't got time to take time out? A lot of my client group don't have the time to take time out to sit and watch an hour-long video. So think about podcasting is something people can do while they're doing something else. Video, not so much. Although if your video is really dull, I have been known to just check my Facebook and keep that lovely face on as if I'm listening and I'm doing something completely different. So bear that in mind. Depends on the group that you are actually speaking to. So if you think about the young and the restless, okay, streaming, they love it. They love it. And the thing about streaming is that they'll grab that little bit of information they want and then forget it. They're a bit like goldfish. So your media has to keep up with them. It has to be short little stories. So you'll notice that social media has brought this whole thing in about stories. So what you're needing to think about is, okay, short stories, short, almost examples. So if you're doing, maybe you're doing safety, danger, stranger danger things, and you're working with teens or things like that, then you're going to have to bring it into something that relates to them, short, sharp and sweet, quick video or a quick stream, and they'll get it. If you take too long, they'll have moved on. They are very young and very restless. And I've put the statistic there, social media, 18 to 29. And then you've got 18 to 34 who don't mind streaming. And I think that may be because it's instant. That generation wants instant. They want instant gratification. They want instant information. They want it there and then. And they won't go looking for it unless someone said, have you seen the cat that can sit on a toilet and wee because he's like a human? Then they'll go off and look for it, but generally they don't. So you have to get in front of them and you have to use a media that gets right in front of them, into their faces, to get that information across. Okay. That's the young and the restless. Traditionalists, we like our daily dose of news. We like our newspapers. We like to watch TV. We like to listen to the radio. So you have to almost translate that into, okay, TV, video, radio, podcast. If you think about it, they're exactly the same thing. We just use titles for different things. And so many people have smart TVs now that if you've got a YouTube video up, people sit in their front rooms and bring it up onto their smart TV as if they're sat watching TV. And the older traditionalists are quite happy doing that. And they'll quite happily sit there for half an hour or so if it's compelling content, and watch it and listen to it. So we talk about TV and radio being sort of something from the past, but it isn't. It's very much of today. It's just been repackaged and labeled something differently. So don't shy away from that. Think about that and think about the traditionalists and how they want to receive that information. Now, if you're, in learning things, I run online courses and I have videos for those courses. They're short and sharp because people don't actually want to do a course on the TV, but they do love receiving information. Open University have been doing it for years, very successfully, because they know how people are taking in that information. And they used to use a TV channel, now they use videos, but it's the same principle, okay? It says they're less likely to use digital media. I personally think that's wrong. And I put that in there and picked it up to, in a way, ask you to seriously consider that, because everybody's using digital media, unless we're talking about maybe the over 70s age group, who may not, like my mother's 90 and she's still got an old TV, and I still have to talk to her, and she says, why can't I get BBC iPlayer and all the others? And I have to keep saying to her, Mum, you don't have a smart TV. Even though she's online, she's got her laptop, they don't understand necessarily the terminology. So everybody is turning more and more to digital. So it's just about how you word it to a more traditionalist audience and the media you use. So don't shy away. If you're working with a much older group from digital media, use it, but use it wisely. use it in a way that is very easy for them to click a button, listen, and take it in. And that age group will take in stuff much more easily than the younger generation, who, as I said, are like goldfish. So bear that in mind when you're thinking about your audience. But there is still a big group of people out there who aren't plugged into this mainstream digital media we use. And they like their books. They like to physically read a book. They like to go and buy a newspaper. And this is across the board. People have different ways of doing things. So I talked mostly about speaking, but I'm going to say, do not throw out the baby with the bathwater? There is still room for thinking about physical print media and physical books or newsletters or things like that, and maybe actually dovetailing the two together. So, for instance, I may produce a newsletter that I email out to people, but I also produce a video where I tell people about what's in the email in the newsletter. So I tend to dovetail the two together sometimes so that I can reach a bigger audience. Because as I say, it's a generalization. For me, I'm a visual person. I like to watch a video more so than I will listen to a podcast. A podcast for me has to be 15 minutes tops because it will keep my attention that long. I'm a visual person. Now, we all know that we have different ways of learning. So again, it's not only about their age demographics, it could be their cultural demographics if you work internationally. It could be just around their habits. It could be around their learning. So the more you understand how your audience receives information and the way they prefer to use and read information, the easier it is to get your stuff in front of those people. Be ahead of all those other people shouting and screaming for their attention. Oh, we don't want to do that. So we also live in a world where people multitask. A lot of the people I work with are multitaskers. They're doing half a dozen things at once, and they're listening to a podcast, driving the kids to school, thinking about what they're going to get for tea, or they're in the office and they've got a headphone in, listening to a podcast while they're doing the accounts or whatever may be happening. So bear that in mind. They want the distraction sometimes. They want and are able to take in that information. I can listen and take stuff in whilst I type. And the reason that I find that easy is because I'm quite a fast typer, brought up in the days when we were taught to type with the right fingers. So I can happily, merrily bang away while I'm listening, and the two work. It's like I can read a book and watch television at the same time, and people go, how can you do that? I'm not saying I do both brilliantly, and I'm not saying I don't miss things, because that's the thing with multitaskers. We all know that to truly focus in on something, to truly take it in, it needs to be one thing at a time. But who has the time these days to do that? We have to multitask. So mothers with young kids will listen to podcasts while they're cooking dinner, while they're taking kids to school, while they're doing the after-school activity runs. Men may listen to podcasts, you know, while they're in the car on the way to work and things like that. Are they visual? Are they? Now, you can't have visual in a car unless you're working with the younger people who then, when they're on the way some great driving holiday, will have their phones, they'll have their pads in the back seat of the car, and they'll watch because they need something to do. They can't sit quietly. So I really just want to make that quite clear, that there are these different ways, and we can't do all of it. We don't know everything about every client we have or every prospective client we have. Sometimes it's a best guess. And it's our job to really, if we want our businesses to thrive, to find the way. Now, it's just statistically proven that speaking to people face to face is still the best way to get information across, which is why I bang on about speaking. Go to networking, stand up and speak, do a presentation at a conference, do a keynote speech, do all of that stuff, because then you've got their attention. They're not distracted, they're not multitasking, they're not suddenly the kids are screaming and so they missed the last 10 minutes of a podcast, which probably had the most important information in it. So whilst these other things online are useful, you've still got to think about what is the best way for me to get my message across to somebody in a way that they're going to receive it. What media will I use? So let me stop sharing there. So that's a sort of a brief overview of why you have to think about. So now you know where your audience, who your audience is, you know where they are. What media are you going to use to get in front of them? That's the question you've got to ask yourself. And you just got to, sometimes it's trial and error. Sometimes you have to go, well, let's see how a podcast goes. Let's put out a video, see how that goes and test it. Or you're going to know your group. If you've really niched, you're going to know that group really, really well. Now, for me, I'm a public speaking coach. So everything I put out there generally is spoken, because it would be a bit weird as a public speaking coach if I never spoke to anybody. So I have to prove my worth by you hearing me speak and understanding that I do it quite well. So I'm worth working with. So think about that. So did all that make sense to Mary and Christina? Mary, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So who are your audience? Remind
me?
Yeah. Mary, sorry.
My audience, if I'm thinking about my client base, would probably be, I would say, in the 35 to 55 age bracket of more senior execs, I would and senior management. They would be the kind of people that I would be seeking to partner with in terms of my work as a copywriter or a writer, because they are decision makers. They have a budget. They can have choices around the marketing plans and structures that they take up. So those would be the kind of people that I would be talking to. But
so would they be traditionalists, or would you think some of them are more young and restless, or somewhere in the middle?
I would think it's a mixture of both, actually. Yeah. I would say that the upper end of the age bracket would probably much more fit into the television, the printed stuff, things that they can watch, podcasts too. Whereas probably the younger end of that spectrum would be interested more in Instagram and maybe short reels, short messaging, talking head shots, that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And also you may think about how busy they are. So short reels are nice and easy to digest as opposed to long videos. So and the thing about video is it's about reusing content sometimes. So I may do quite a long video for a masterclass or for something else, but then chop it down into short reels. So each little bit becomes a short reel. So actually you're just reusing content you've already done. That we are going to do a session on reusing content and how you can take one thing and create 20 different content ideas from it, which makes people's life a lot easier. But it also helps then to sort of think about, like for you, all right, traditionalists can have it in a chunk. Those that may be a lot younger and really busy, I can chop it down into little bits and they can have it spoon fed to them almost. And then that's a really, and then you've also got a library of assets that you've built up that you can reuse again and again, and things like that. So yes, understanding that is really important when you're doing these things, because none of us have got the time to waste our time trying things that don't work. It's like masterclasses like this, 30 minutes. That's mostly most people's attention span, because again, they've got stuff to do, and we might not like that world, but we live in it. So yeah,
sure.
Any other questions, Mary?
Um, not that I can think of immediately.
Okay.
If you're doing podcasts,
Yeah.
are you finding that podcasts of say 15 minutes is the sort of optimum time for people to listen? I listen to a lot of podcasts myself whilst
Yeah.
I'm doing things. I take my pad around with me. Um,
Again, it's about knowing who your audience is. I don't, because I'm a visual person, I find for me 15 minutes is long enough. I can take in that information. So, but then you've got people who are very audible. They just love, and they will listen. You know, if they're driving 200-300 miles, they'll listen to a full podcast while they're driving. And the good thing about that is, we all know repetition is the way to get people to learn. So I often think that if you're going to do something that's, say, half an hour and more or an hour long, you get the chance to repeat a key message through that whole sort of theme. So by the time they've driven from down south up to Scotland, they know it without even know they know it. Subliminally,
yeah.
that message has gone in, and people will listen for a long time while they're driving. So we're back to people's activities and how they listen. So having that in one entirety, but then having the option of possibly breaking it down for people who go, like myself, who go, no, I can't listen for that long. I'll listen, you know, and even in the car, I change stations so many times to listen to different types of music when I'm driving fast. So yeah, it's about giving options for me. So everything I do, I try to look at it and go, can I break that down into little bits for the people who need the little bits?
Yeah.
Or can I stitch it all together to make it something for people who are, like, over the Christmas period is going to be a prime time to put something a bit bigger together, because people are traveling to family, so, or traveling to Christmas parties or whatever it may be. So something slightly longer in the car, they're going to listen to it, they're going to take it in. The other thing about activities is how much of their brain is taken up doing the other thing. So that multitasking when you're driving, you know, most of your attention hopefully is on the road. So whatever you're saying has to be taken in and digested, you know, in the brain power easily. Get it too complicated and the brain doesn't have the maneuver to think, because it's got to be on the road. Otherwise we're going to have 101 accidents on the motorway, because it's very easy to stop and go, what was that? I listen to the news sometimes and I go, and I find myself reacting to something I've heard and have to get my head back into the road. So bear that in mind as well. So keep it simple. If you know people are listening to it while they're driving, if they're cooking or they're at home doing things, that's different. You know, they'll quite happily listen. And because it's recorded, they can go back and listen to it again. If they suddenly think, oh, I really missed that bit, I'm going to go back. So it's understanding the activities that are likely to happen with your audience, what they're likely to be doing. So what's the easiest way for them to hear it? And the easier it is for them, the more they're going to come back for more, because you're not making their life difficult.
No. One other question I want to ask you. Newsletters. I have been hesitant about starting a newsletter and circulating it for the simple reason that I get inundated with newsletters from people, which I would like to read, but I don't have the time. So it's a bit pointless now.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm wondering whether they still have the traction that you're wanting to get, simply because we're just bombarded with information all the time.
I personally, yeah, I'm like you. I don't read long newsletters. So my newsletters are my email out of what's happened this week and what's coming up next week. So they're more in terms of informing people of what's going to be coming up, and then I'll put a little bit of, you know, learning stuff in it. LinkedIn at the moment is probably the best place to do newsletters, because that pops into our inbox and it's nice and simple and we can read it and go, oh, that's interesting. So articles, things like that work better than the old-fashioned newsletters that we are used to getting. So if we're talking about traditionalists who like to read, They're going to be mostly on LinkedIn anyway, because that's the demographic. So maybe use their technology rather than your own, and just do articles. And you can send them out to relevant groups. You can send them out to some, you know, if you've got people, your connections, you can send them specific connections, but just have one thing at a time. I don't think any of us have got the time now to go, oh, there's about 5 different articles in that newsletter. No, I might have skimmed the first one, but I'm not going any further because I don't have the time like you. So one at a time. It's about simplicity. It's about saying, this is information today. It may be something's changed in the law, so you're letting people know. It may be, like for me, I have this 13-week cycle. So I will do an article or a newsletter about media and what media you use. So it's all about making it easy for your listener, for your audience every time.
When you talk about using the LinkedIn platform for newsletters, are you still not having to have access to your audience's emails in order to send those?
No,
I do lots of posting. I post articles and I post on LinkedIn. So I don't see what a newsletter is then.
I'm assuming they still do this because LinkedIn have changed a bit recently. But when you go into to write an article instead of the post, there used to be, and if I'm wrong, I'm going to apologize to you all now, a thing about newsletter. So you set up a newsletter, how often it's going to go out, and things like that. And so you click in there and you put your article in and it goes out as a newsletter. But the way it's done is they're all collected in a way that a newsletter might be. So later on, you might want to, repurpose that. But in a way, it's no different to articles. I would say articles are today's newsletters.
Okay, yeah, because I do that. I try and post a
and I find,
and
I think they're really useful. The only thing with that is you can't put a lot of links in an article if you want. So what I tend to do is, as I say, end of the week, I'll send out an email to my whole list just with, don't forget to sign up for Thursday's thing. Don't, have you join the network. I put the links in there. And then I'll go, there's a great article on LinkedIn. Here it is if you want to go and have a look. And never more than 3, because 3 is enough for people to think about. And that's it. I think, again, although we're talking about traditionalists liking to read, they like to read on their own. So they don't mind going to LinkedIn and reading an article, but they don't necessarily want to read it on an email because they're too busy with the other emails. So
that's right.
And I'm quite inclined to go, oh, that looks interesting. I'll just leave that email there. And when I've got 10 minutes, I'll go and click in and I'll go and read the article. So that's something that works, I think, works really well. But again, it comes down to how engaged maybe your email group is, or your Facebook group, or your LinkedIn. We come back to how engaged are they. The more engaged they are, the more likely they are to read a newsletter. If it's fun and enjoyable and exciting, if they're younger audience, no, no, it's got to be a picture. We're back to cave type. It makes me laugh. The old days it was cave paintings. We're back to that now on Instagram. One image that'll say it all. Just in the middle. So,
exactly.
Yeah. The other thing is, I find with the article things is, as I'm writing articles, I'm actually thinking about, if I ever want to write a book, there's all my content. So I tend to say to people, think ahead with your content. Think about what can you do with it afterwards. Some content is just about what's happening today, or there's a war coming. But a lot of content we produce, if you think about it long term, can become part of something bigger.
Okay.
Make your life easy, make their life easy. That's the trick. That's why I say repurposing content is great, because you build a great big library of assets of content that you can use. And the more you make it, especially for you working with people that are in management roles and things, who are busy, no matter their age, they're going to be busy in a very difficult world we live in. The easier you make it for them, the more they're going to come back to you, rather than the person who's making it really difficult and going, click here, click there, click. And they're going, oh, I've got time to click. I haven't even got time to wipe my backside. make it easy for them, and they appreciate that, and you then become known as the person who's going to make their life easier, not more difficult.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Yeah. Yes, thank you.
No
Thank you very
worries.
much. Good. Okay, I shall go away and
well, you know where to find me. If you've got any questions, just chuck it over and we'll have a look at it. But you've now got those 3 pillars of audience: who they are, where they are, and how they're listening.
yeah.
And those 3, once you've figured that out, and as I say, it's a generalization, because we're not all the same, but sometimes we have to sort of work in generalizations to hope to get the biggest audience.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
You'll be fine.
God, forever trying to capture the audience and just what I'm finding is that yeah.
I personally think we need to simplify these things, because it is so noisy out there, and I think we're all sick of the noise. We're all, especially if we're working and it's B2B, we've got all this going on, and I find the simpler I make things, the easier it is for people to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
that
was the
quiet
first
voice coming in underneath all the clamour.
Yeah, that was the first rule I had when I was doing my freelance journalism training. When pitching to editors, I actually created a pitch in bullet points, and my tutor loved it. She said, "Oh, I like that. I'll read it." Yeah,
that's it. Yeah, and if people want more, then they'll come to you and ask for a deeper stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
But it is about tiering that. Let's keep it simple right down. Let's not be too clever. So many people want to be clever. They want these big words. They want these big methodologies. They want these, and actually, I don't have time to translate all that.
No.
Just tell me in simple terms. And then if I want more, I'll come and talk to you.
Exactly.
If I'm not getting that initial message, or if I'm not hearing that initial conversation, then I'm never going to come to this complicated world you live in, because you think it's really clever. And if it's made clever, people will pay for it. I personally think no, people pay for value. They pay for what's going to benefit them, not just because it looks clever.
And for what they understand. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Not an academic exercise,
Yeah.
If you want that, go to university.
Absolutely. Yeah. And even those that went to university are still going, what?
Yeah.
All right, then. I'm going to leave that with you. You'll get
Thank you very much, Beth.
Yeah, no worries. And I'll see you again soon. All right.
Thank you. Yeah, have a wonderful day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.